treated to. Just one or two points that I need to make. If we can ensure that we're on mute, please, while Anna's presenting. And we will be recording this session. And Jo, who never likes the limelight, but is always here, keeping us right, keeping us on track, helping us publicise all these events, and doing everything for us to make sure that we're on track, has already started the recording. So thanks for that, Jo. I know you do kind of like hide away a little bit, but thank you so much for all your support during these events. So I'm I'm Yvonne Taylor. I kind of take care of the sleep work, the nutrition work, and lots of different projects, and try and coordinate all the events that we have ongoing. For those that are just joining us, can you please just check you're on mute, please, before Anna starts her presentation? Thank you so much. Yeah, so I look after the nutrition and the sleep work, and get to work with fabulous experts that are here today, such as Anna. So I don't want to go on too much, and I will just hand over to you, Anna, if that's okay. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say this morning.
Thank you, Yvonne. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this hour today. My name's Anna Earle. I'm a registered nutritionist with Nutrivival, and this is our final webinar in the 4-part series, Feed Your Body Clock. And if you're new to these webinars, I'm a former police officer. I used to work in Essex Police, and I now have retrained and I now specialise in chrononutrition, which looks at how and when we eat and how that affects our health. So this is particularly relevant for shift workers. We look at very much at the impact of eating during the night, and do quite a lot of work around that as well. But if you're not a shift worker, this topic today will still be very, very relevant to you, I hope. So April marks Stress Awareness Month, and so today's topic does fit within that. We're looking at food for mood. And so both parts 3 and 4 of the Feed Your Body Clock programme explain the overlapping relationships between stress management, food choices, digestion, and the impact on your health, both short and long-term impact on your health. So in part 3, we looked at mindful eating. I'll just share my screen there so we can see the different parts that we've covered so far. So we looked at mindful eating, and that was the effect of eating while stressed, eating on the go, eating with common digestive issues such as indigestion, bloating, heartburn, and constipation. Very common symptoms that we have when we're eating, when we're stressed and eating on the go. Obviously very, very common in your policing roles. And we looked at the habitual patterns of comfort versus conscious eating, and the benefits of investing in 3 nourishing meals per day to support your energy, your metabolism, for balancing weight and overall health. So with mindful eating, we can still enjoy occasional treats. We make those food choices consciously, but we don't depend on them for our energy or for that temporary sense of well-being. So that was mindful eating. Before I launch into today's subject, again, if you're joining us for the first time yet and haven't seen the previous sessions, they're all recorded and available on the Oscar Kilo website, and I'll share the link for those at the end. And just to recap, part 1, we looked at nutrition to help manage your energy. Your food choices and your food timings affect your blood sugar, and weight management, which are significant factors in many chronic illnesses. So looking at this more closely would be a great place to start in your proactive health management. And as I've mentioned before, it's also key to reducing your risk of type 2 diabetes, particularly if you've been told that you are pre-diabetic. And then in part 2, we looked at what, when, and how to eat around the 24-hour clock. So this is the chrononutrition part, chrono meaning time, nutrition meaning food. So that's really my specialty, and your timing and the impact of that on your health. We looked at that in greater depth. And today we're continuing the theme of nutrition to support our mental health in food for mood. And this is a relatively new field known as nutritional psychiatry, rather grandly. And it studies diet quality as a modifiable risk factor for mental illness. My first couple of slides will look at why nutritional psychiatry is important and where it has a role to play in supporting mental health. So we'll look take a closer look, first of all, at factors that affect our mood. So this session looks at the concept of dietary choice being more than fuel to support you physically. So whereas we eat to get fuel to have energy and to grow and to sustain us as physical beings, our food for energy, there is growing research which finds very compelling links between dietary choice and brain health. And that includes then food for mood. So today we're going to be looking at what are triggers of low mood, the impact of low mood on work performance and family life, ongoing inflammation and its effect on the brain. And then we'll look at nutritional deficiencies and mood disorders and diet quality as a modifiable factor. So our mood is affected by so many different factors. It could be our relationships, which can change from day to day, or our mood relating to relationships that could be fixed for years. We might have both positive and slightly more negative relationships that that can, trigger state of anxiety, state of stress with those relationships. Maybe if you've got teenagers, for example, as I have, that might be a day-to-day change. You might not necessarily know how those relationships are going to go from one day to the next, so that can fluctuate, but can really affect how we feel. Our general mindset can affect our mood. The sort of stereotypical image of that will be whether we're a cup half full or a cup half empty type of character. Our past life experiences, our state of health, our genetics, our current stress levels, what we're dealing with day to day right now, and how we respond to different stressors. Hormones. For women, this can be very much affected by menstrual cycle, and then later by perimenopause and menopause, making us teary one moment and enraged the next. Men and women together, we have our stress hormones, our different levels of adrenaline and cortisol, as well as hormones that specifically affect how we feel, so our levels of serotonin and dopamine. And then food can be triggered by our different activity and fitness levels. Whether we're in a slightly sedentary role can affect our mood. Our ability to sleep has a huge impact on how we function, our levels of focus, our patience, our ability to show empathy. And within that category could also come shift pattern. So how might an early turn affect you, or a set of nights? Different people will have preferences that suit them better. In part one of Feed Your Body Clock, when we talked about what, when and how to eat, we talked about our specific chronotype. So our natural body clock preferences that are specific to us as individuals, whether we're a night owl or a lark. And then we come to diet. And this is where the food for mood, the nutritional psychiatry comes in. Nutrient deficiencies and a diet high in ultra-processed foods can negatively impact our mood. And we'll look at those in greater detail. So some of these factors are beyond our direct control, but also everything on this list can change. Even how we live with our past experiences and our genetics, none of these have to define who we are and how we feel. So consider this list and the effects that each of these factors have on our work performance, as well as how they might affect us behaving at home as a partner, a friend, a parent, and a neighbour. And so zooming in on diet, this is one modifiable factor that can make an effective difference. It can be preventative. We can make some powerful changes to how we feel with the right mindset, know-how, opportunity, and support in relation to optimum nutrition. So the main treatment for mood disorders, we'll just unshare for a moment. There we go. Okay, so the main treatment for mood disorders is predominantly pharmaceutical interventions such as antidepressants, which may be relied on long term, and they come with associated side effects and can be taken in combination with some psychotherapy such as cognitive behavioural therapy, and these obviously treat diagnosed conditions. A report in July 2022, so last year, reports that in 2021 and 2022, some 8.3 million NHS patients in the UK received an antidepressant drug. This is a 6% rise on the previous year, when the figure was 7.9 million. It's the 6th year in a row, 2022 to 2023, that NHS patients have received an antidepressant drug. This is a 6% rise on the previous year, when the figure was 7.9 million. It's the 6th year in a row, 2022 to 2023, that NHS patients have received an antidepressant drug. that there has been an increase in both patients and prescriptions. The data also showed that women were around twice as likely to be prescribed antidepressants as men, with 5.5 million women prescribed drugs for depressive conditions in 2021 and 22, compared with 2.8 million men. So there should certainly have some financial appeal for healthcare providers to look at nutrition as a modifiable factor in looking to reduce mental illness. The influence of nutrition to support mood can work in two ways. As with the pharmaceutical treatments, it can be reactive, where you have that diagnosed condition and you look to nutritional interventions to support it. But it can also be preventative. And that's what I'm going to look at. When combined with different lifestyle medicines, it can be even more effective. So the great thing about nutrition is it has this preventative effect. You can take measures to build health and resilience. Focus your diet on foods that encourage brain health. So when you invest time to evaluate where you best need to prioritize these different holistic areas of stress management, exercise, nutrition, good sleep, and finding emotional balance, when we can try and establish a routine that supports all of these areas, we can look to find optimal you in the middle. When I talk about emotional balance, what I mean by that is that you're generally happy in your skin. You feel supported with a positive social network. You have a reasonable level of grit and resilience to cope with everyday work and life. And if there are other areas of life that you can't control, fueling and moving your body appropriately, spending time in good company, these are examples where you can take some positive action and help to influence how you feel. So now I'm going to move on to a very small little biology lesson to illustrate how poor nutrition can affect mood. So a common feature from that list of factors that affect our mood is inflammation. That may be a term that you are familiar with, perhaps from hearing about anti-inflammatory diets and inflammatory illnesses and conditions. But what does inflammation really mean? So it's one of the body's main ways of protecting itself from injury or infection. It is a natural first aid immune response. If we cut ourselves or we get an injury, like in this diagram, we're designed not to bleed to death. These white blood cells in the picture, they stage a rescue, moving out of their blood vessel to stem the bleeding by clotting and scabbing the area. And this natural immune response is pro-inflammatory. So in this situation, in a first aid situation, we want and we need inflammation. It causes pain, redness, heat, and swelling. And these are all important messages that there is a site of injury that requires healing. This response is designed to be a short-term healing process. This is the body's immune function in action to protect you. The problem occurs when the inflammatory response does not switch off, when the condition is not short, but ongoing or chronic. And an unhealthy lifestyle that includes smoking, a poor diet, high alcohol consumption, a sedentary lifestyle, so a tendency for inactivity, along with stress and weight gain, they can all cause this type of persistent inflammation. It's much more subtle than the first aid response shown here. This chronic type of inflammation, it simmers under the surface rather than switching off. We call it low-grade inflammation. And we can't see it from the outside, but we can do various different tests to look for inflammatory levels. Inflammation produces harmful chemicals, and they can contribute to many conditions that you may be familiar with, such as Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, and these are caused by inflammation in the brain. Cancers, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, allergies and asthma, skin conditions like acne, eczema, psoriasis, arthritis, and anxiety and depression. So looking back at that list of factors that can affect our mood, stress can have an inflammatory effect on the body, whether past stress, which may stem back even to childhood trauma, or current stress that you're dealing with day to day now. Disrupted sleep is inflammatory. Our state of health, So if we're prone to short-term infections, for example, like a stomach infection or a chest infection, there will be biological levels of inflammation present. Excess weight increases inflammation in your body. So levels of activity and fitness are really significant here in managing inflammation. You may have a genetic disposition for certain conditions, such as high cholesterol or slow metabolism. But a genetic condition can be seen like a bullet. You actually need something to pull that trigger to fire the bullet. You can live with these conditions. You can delay the onset of them with really positive diet and lifestyle. They can play really key roles in reducing the likelihood of those conditions being manifested. So findings in research report there is an established link between diet quality and mental health. A diet high in processed foods is a risk factor for depression, whereas a whole food pattern is protective. And I'll explain what I mean and illustrate what I mean by whole foods in a moment. So I repeat the phrase I've said a couple of times before, but what you eat affects how you think and feel. It's believed that some nutrient deficiencies contribute to mood disorders. So that's being low in certain nutrients. And a lot of those nutrients that are helpful for brain health will be deplete in processed and ultra-processed foods. You can't always tell whether you are low in certain nutrients just from a simple blood test, because some nutrients are stored in bone and tissue. So levels won't show up in your blood necessarily. But if we eat foods that combine the really important nutrients that support brain health and make sure that we are having them regularly, and if they then help us to feel better, then sometimes we can deduce that, yes, I probably was low in a specific nutrient. So whilst we're faced with an abundance of food choice, we may be nutritionally poor. So a whole food diet will include the essential nutrients to support and promote brain and associated hormonal health to impact mood. So first of all, I want to show you the foods that can have that negative impact, that inflammatory effect on mental health. They're generally found in the following three groups that can have this pro-inflammatory effect on the body. So the first one being refined carbohydrates. So these are our white floury goods, anything made with white flour that's had all of the external fibrous kernel removed. So we're looking at white pasta and white bread, white pizza, pastries and cakes. We're looking at our sweets and chocolates as well, and also looking at breakfast cereals. Those are our refined carbohydrates. And then processed foods, these are the more industrially produced packaged products. These will generally least resemble their original ingredient. So this will be things like donuts and ice cream, biscuits, crisps, pies. Some of the lower quality and reformed, breadcrumbed and battered frozen goods also include processed meats. So that comes under the group of processed foods, and then foods with added sugars. So our fizzy drinks, sweetened desserts, including some sweetened yogurts, breakfast cereals, sweets and chocolate. And these foods can cause that underlying simmering level of inflammation that really can contribute to poor mental health. There is really excellent scientific evidence of a link between the gut and the brain. We call it the gut-brain axis. And it's where messages, sort of neuromessages, neurotransmitters, so brain sort of chemicals and signals do speak to each other between the gut and the brain. And so cruelly, that list can be the foods that we want to crave when we are low. They're our go-to comfort foods when we're feeling low. They don't take a long time to prepare. They're very easily accessible anywhere that you walk out of your front door. You're going to be presented with all of these foods that are designed and created to draw us in, to try and make us feel better. But as we all know, that it gives us that temporary lift. So this session is really about inviting you to think slightly more long-term about the longer-term impact of these foods. So then these foods are what typically makes up and are championed as the Mediterranean diet in this anti-inflammatory list here. These are our whole foods. They tend to more closely resemble their original form And the Mediterranean diet will also include moderate amounts of meat, dairy, and eggs alongside these anti-inflammatory foods, vegetables and fruit, fish, and whole grains. So the Mediterranean diet will also add in there some lean meat, a small amount of dairy, and eggs, which gives us a really good quality protein if we're meat eaters. So vegetables and fruit here, that will encompass all plant foods. So that will include our nuts and seeds, our herbs and spices, and your key healthy fat, your extra virgin olive oil. And this really is championed as being really quite a significant part of the Mediterranean diet that can be really, really beneficial. So combining these foods gives you a plate of nutrient-dense food, and that's a really good thing. They are nourishing, you get a good bang for your buck, and perhaps you can see from this list why my focus is more generally on counting nutrients rather than calories. So if you were to look at calories in these two different categories, it's really not comparable if you're looking at the nutrient content of these foods. You know, you can't, even if you look at some of the vegetables and fruit, you know, avocado being one of the favorites that people can get concerned about because of the high fat content, the benefits of that on the brain and on other, and the fact that it is a healthy fat as well for helping to manage appetite is so beneficial that getting bogged down with the calories can really kind of blur actually the benefits of a lot of these foods. So I really champion getting nutrient dense foods onto your plate. And so then we add in, so one key factor for enhancing your plate of food can just be in adding in a portion of vegetables wherever you can, getting used to seeing a lot of varied colour in your different dishes. So in summary here, there are two key messages. Number one, there is a correlation between high levels of inflammation and mood disorders. And these foods are inflammatory. And then number two, anti-inflammatory whole foods can be neuroprotective. They can help to protect the brain and everything then that comes from the brain, our thoughts and our feelings and emotions. So many of the foods from that red pro-inflammatory list come under the definition of ultra-processed foods. Many foods have to be processed in some way for them to be palatable and digestible. So we're not demonizing all processed foods. If you think about porridge oats and some cheeses or a tub of hummus, some herbal teas, they've all had to go through some kind of processing for us to be able to actually eat them. But they've undergone some processing, but not necessarily at the nutritional expense of that product. So a paper that I've read about ultra-processed foods gives the definition of these kinds of foods are formulations of ingredients. They're mostly of exclusive industrial use, and they result from a series of industrial processes, hence ultra-processed. Many require sophisticated equipment and technology. So we're thinking of very highly ultra-processed sweet and savoury snacks, reconstituted meats like your chicken nuggets and your pork pies, low quality pizzas, chocolate bars and sweets, unfortunately, amongst other things. And the ingredients that are characteristic of these ultra-processed foods include food substances that are of no or rare culinary use. So that means they are not ingredients that we would find typically in our kitchen cupboards at home. They are seen on, so these kinds of ingredients seen on the packaging labels will be things like high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin, protein isolates, hydrogenated oil, and then cosmetic additives such as their colours, flavours, flavour enhancers, emulsifiers, thickeners, and artificial sweeteners. These are all designed to make the final product more palatable, but they're not food. They're certainly not food to nourish you. They are generally foods designed to attract you to eat more. And I was quite shocked and saddened to read that ultra-processed foods now make up 50% of a typical UK adult's diet. These foods have an inflammatory effect on your body and on your brain, and inflammation affects your mood. So it makes sense to look to reduce levels of inflammation in the body, inflammation that is not simply responding to that short-term first aid of stemming your blood flow from a cut or fighting off a cough or a cold. And one way to do that is looking to reduce these pro-inflammatory foods and adding in the anti-inflammatory foods, being a great place to start. This will have a knock-on effect to benefit your blood sugar. That will impact your energy, it will impact your weight. And if this feels too hard, then I suggest you just try looking at an 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time, we try to eat whole foods, we try to prepare fresh food ourselves, and prioritize making time for that, because of the long-term health benefits for us and for those that we live with and are feeding. And then 20% of the time, we can just, give ourselves a bit of a realistic break. We can enjoy those foods for the soul, those treats, but they do become occasional rather than being 50% of our daily food intake. So where should our focus be on food to support our brain health and our mood? So we've looked at those beneficial food groups, the vegetables and fruit, the fish and the whole grains. And the main evidence is that it is this combination of healthy foods that contribute overall to positive mental health. Many studies of very specific nutrients are quite inconclusive. So it backs up the nutritional therapy priority of food first, rather than getting too obsessed with supplementing individual nutrients, unless you do know that you are particularly low. So if you know that you're anemic, which will affect your energy and your get up and go, which will affect your mood. So then you would be looking to just treat that possibly with high sources of iron-rich foods, or possibly with an iron supplement if you're under your GP for that. But for those of you who just want to know what to eat, so noting down the foods listed here might be sufficient information for you. And then I'm just going to delve a little bit deeper for anyone who is interested in an understanding about the mechanisms of certain nutrients within these foods that contribute to our neurological health. But I don't want to go too deep and overwhelm anybody. So first of all, we look at foods that are rich in B vitamins, because B vitamins do really help support our brain health. And foods that are nice and rich in B vitamins would be our meat, fish, dairy, eggs, dark green leafy vegetables. And again, as a nation, we're quite poor at getting our dark green leafy veg in very regularly. And this is something that it would be great to adopt multiple times in the week. So we're looking at our spinach leaves, our kale, all the different sort of dark cabbagey, like Cavallero Nero leaves and things like that. And the dark cabbages. We're also looking at the sort of bitter salad leaves, so rocket and watercress, and the bags that you can get with that, rather than going down the iceberg lettuce route, which is pretty much water. So the darker green the leaf, the higher the nutrients are going to be in that, with those lovely B vitamins and some really beneficial minerals as well. So you can see from this list that if you're vegan, you may want to keep an eye, particularly on your vitamin B12 levels, as these can be low, as they can only be found naturally in animal-based products. So you might want to get your B12 levels checked and then consider supplementing if you are found to be low in that. So here we have prebiotics and fibre. So prebiotics, these are some vegetables and fruits. So within this group, we've got the beneficial vitamins and minerals, which play so many key roles, way more than just thinking about vitamin C supporting your immune system if you've got a cold. Vitamins and minerals make every process happen in your body. Without an intake of vitamins and minerals, we can't convert any of the foods that we eat for our fuel, so our carbohydrates and our fats. We can't convert those into energy without vitamins and minerals. So we can eat a great big plate of carbs to get the energy, but our body can't do anything with it unless it's got vitamins and minerals to help with the conversion into fuel. It's like switching on that switch. The vitamins and minerals switch on that conversion switch. Vegetables and fruit contain plant chemicals called phytonutrients. Phyto means plants, so phytonutrients just means nutrients in plants. And these chemicals can have that lovely beneficial anti-inflammatory effect on the body. And then this particular group of vegetables and fruit, these are known as prebiotics. Prebiotics are the food of choice for our gut bugs, our gut microbiome, and they help keep our gut bug population in balance. So too much junk food starves these beneficial gut bugs, and the more harmful species of bacteria and microbes can take over in the gut, and they can really cause problems. Remember, I talked about that gut-brain axis. So in our gut, where our trillions of gut bacteria live, if they are taken over by the more harmful species because the beneficial gut bugs haven't been fed with these prebiotics, then we can have quite an inflammatory arena going on in the gut, and we have that gut-brain message going backwards and forwards. So that's how we can be getting a more pro-inflammatory environment going up towards the brain. So our beneficial gut microbiome that lives mainly in our large intestine, they produce chemicals that help to produce our mood hormones. So the state of our gut health really does have that direct impact on how we feel. And then we come to our lovely anti-inflammatory omega-3. This is a polyunsaturated fat with anti-inflammatory properties. And studies have reported a really beneficial effect of this on brain health. Has the added benefit also of being really good for joints. And so having these foods regularly in our diet is another reason not to demonize all fats and try and go low fat on everything. We need fat in our diet. We do need to watch our intake of trans fats, which comes back to the processed foods. And we need to just keep an eye, sort of regulate our intake of saturated fats, but we do still need saturated fat in the body as well, and we can get that from leaner cuts of meat. But our bodies don't make this particular polyunsaturated fat at all, called omega-3, so we need to get it from foods, and we get it mainly from oily fish and also from flax, or also known as linseeds, and in walnuts. So those are really the only three main food sources for omega-3. Our oily fish, that would include the list of salmon, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, and herring. So again, if you are vegetarian or vegan, you might want to consider an omega-3 supplement. But do take caution if you're taking any anticoagulant medication, because omega-3 can be naturally anticoagulant. But you might want to consider a quality supplement, and you could do that in conversation with a healthcare practitioner if required. Also, so these foods will also take us back again to the Mediterranean diet, where also you're going to benefit from regular sunlight. So getting out as much as possible offers the benefit of exposure to vitamin D, and the proven benefit as well of being outdoors. So there is that benefit of getting out in nature on our general well-being. So rather than maybe just supplementing vitamin D because we're low, we might need to do that as well if we're low, particularly coming out of winter. But actually getting outside and getting the natural sunlight, the vitamin D from the sun, and getting that benefit of being outdoors can also come within that kind of remit of the benefits of the Mediterranean diet that you would get. So then we come to talk about probiotics. So this is once we've fed our gut bugs with the prebiotic vegetables there in that list, we then have a look at the probiotics. And these are actually bacteria found in different kinds of foods, which can sound a bit weird to be encouraging you to actually eat foods that are slightly going off a bit, have fermented a little bit. But actually, they are also very beneficial. They can really help to rebalance that population of our gut microbiome if we are tending to have more of the more harmful species taking over, either from diet or from an infection or from levels of stress and so on. They can really impact our population of gut bacteria. So eating foods and drinking foods as well, drinking beverages that contain probiotics can also be part of a really healthy diet. And these are some examples which for some people these might sound a little bit alien, but kefir is a drink that is a slightly fermented yogurt. It just tastes a little bit sourer than natural yogurt, but it's something you could just put a tablespoon or two onto some granola or some oats or something like that, or pop it into a smoothie. Kombucha is a fermented tea drink. You can buy that in cans in any supermarket now. And it is it's a really great way if you want to try and glean yourself off fizzy drinks, so like Coke and lemonades and those kinds of things. If you really feel that you rely on those, kombucha can be a really healthy switch. It's slightly fizzy, and it comes in all different kinds of flavors, different fruity flavors, or there's like a lemon and ginger one, and that is a natural probiotic as well, so you get this much more beneficial choice. Miso is a fermented soybean paste that can be added, a bit like a sort of stock cubey type flavour that you can add to soups or to different main dishes as well. And then sauerkraut. This is our fermented cabbage generally. And to get the benefit from sauerkraut, you don't want the type that are slightly cheaper brands that are just the cabbage has just been pickled in vinegar, because that actually kills off the probiotics. So it would be the natural sauerkraut that you can get also in any supermarket, that has been sort of naturally fermented too. So those are 5 different examples of probiotics, and they're not overly common in the Western diet at the moment. They are becoming more well known. Most of our day-to-day supermarkets now will provide different varieties of these, and natural yogurt as well. So here we don't have the added sugars for the sweetened flavourings, which are the sort of the more processed yogurts. If we're looking for a lovely natural full fat yogurt, there'll be some probiotic elements in that too to benefit from. So then finally, I just take you now to the Oscar Kilo resources. So in terms of putting all of this together and looking at what should I then eat, we know we've spent a little bit of time on foods that we want to try and reduce, maybe even avoid. If you are particularly prone to having low mood, you might want to be sort of reconsider how much of your diet is processed and ultra processed, and starting to introduce more of these lovely whole foods. So the vegetables and fruit, your intake of fish if you aren't vegetarian or vegan, and intake of whole grains. So those will be things like your brown pasta, your wholemeal pasta, and whole grains in bread as well, brown and granary and wholemeal breads, and looking at brown and wild rice, also at things like quinoa and barley, and all the different kinds of grains that you can sort of try to switch from those refined carbohydrates that we looked at. So here, if you look at the Oscar Kilo services, we've got the Nutrition for Wellbeing pages here, and there is a recipe section, and all of these will be great for food for mood. They've all got some wonderful nutritious ingredients in, so I'd invite you to just have a little look through those at your leisure, and experiment. And this is just an example of 2 out of the 6 categories that we've got at the moment, and I'm constantly adding to these as well. So we've also got a section on smoothies, on soups, on snacks, and on different kinds of dips too. And over the coming 12 months, you might see me demonstrating some of these on some short little videos to try and encourage you to give these things a go if they're quite new to you. And then we also have a little toolkit on the Oscar Kilo nutrition pages as well. So currently we have a meal planner, which I think is really key to healthy eating. I just think like getting it down on paper, the meals that you're going to eat and provide for yourselves and your family if necessary over the maybe 4 or 5 days worth, and you put those into your shopping list and you have those ingredients ready to go, takes away so much of the mental pressure as to what to eat every day, and finding yourself 3 or 4 times in the supermarket each week, spending more than you would do had you planned certain meals. And here you can get that, you can make sure that you've got that range of beneficial foods to support mood for people and to support energy too, to give people's moods a lift. You can work out on what days you're really time poor, so it's going to be really challenging to cook a nutritious meal, and you can identify perhaps where in the week could you plan that in advance, could you get that made and baked and in the fridge or in the freezer, so it's all ready for that day that is particularly challenging. Or even preparing for your set of nights, You know, when can you get some healthy meals prepped and in the freezer, or even partly prepped, to encourage that healthy eating with those whole foods, because it is a lot more effort than buying ready meals and processed meals and everything that's packaged and all done, chopped and cooked for you. But hopefully you can understand some of the benefits of investing that time, and prioritizing it, because there is really no shortcut. It is going to take time, but hopefully you can see that it is really there to benefit you. So finally, this is just back to the it makes sense flour. So food for mood works most effectively when you can adopt it hand in hand with great lifestyle practices. You can't just eat your way out of poor lifestyle habits and expect to feel well. And as you'll have seen with a lot of the work that Sophie Bostock has done with sleep as well, they need to be hand in hand. Low mood is likely to persist if you are stressed, if you're not sleeping well, if you don't make time to get out and exercise, and if you don't have that solid social network of good people who make you feel happy. So it's challenging when you're time poor, when you're busy on shifts and trying to prioritize all these different things. So just take it really slowly and gradually, decide where your priority is for this week, focus on that. And then when you're feeling resilient enough and you've got the energy to tackle the next thing, just go step by step, and invest a few months in trying to just really prioritize your self-care, and use this as part of your whole self-care package. So hopefully that's given you a helpful insight on where to focus. So thanks again for joining, and it would be great now if anyone has any comments or questions, or anything that they would like to share, or any effective foods as well that you would like to share.
Oh, just a bit of a delay in me coming off mute there, Anna. Thank you very much for that. Another interesting presentation. And I think, as you mentioned, you know, particularly for shift workers, it's a bit of sort of the planning and the shopping list, and not just grabbing what's on the shelf in the supermarket. That definitely helped me in terms of just investing that little bit of time for planning ahead of the game. So we've got some questions in the chat bar, so I'll just go to them. Robert is asking, can you tell us something about getting protein into the diet for non-meat and fish eaters?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some wonderful plant-based proteins. If you eat dairy, then you could start off with natural yogurt. It's a really great source of protein. And trying to get protein in at the start of the day is particularly beneficial. So you could be looking at oats, natural yogurt, nuts and seeds, eggs. If you're not vegan, eggs are a brilliant way to start the day. A couple of boiled eggs can really set you up and get you right through till lunchtime without feeling that you need to be snacking through the morning. So, you know, slightly more tricky if you're vegan, but still you can get your protein from tofu, from nuts and seeds, and they would be the main sources of protein for you if you're vegan.
Cool, thank you. And the next one from Pamela. What's the opinion on the dried clean greens to add to liquids like Real? Is that how you say it? Real, RHEAL. Could these do the same? I've never heard of Real, if that's how you say it. So, oh, good. Pamela, do you want to come off mute and ask about that one?
Yeah, it's just the company name, Real Superfoods. I think they do clean greens, and they do balance, which is some berries and some other superfoods.
Yeah, they can certainly be helpful for giving you those extra nutrients. I would just say be cautious about relying on them as the main base of your nutrients. So really try to go food first, and then if you feel that you've got your meals pretty much nailed, but you still need some extra things, whether it's just at particular times of the month or through different phases, then some of these can give you that extra boost. So yeah, just keep a really good eye on the ingredients and make sure that there's not too many other like fillers and things like that in. So quite often with supplements like that, you do get what you pay for. So some of the better quality brands that you do have to pay up for will have nutrients that we can then absorb more easily. Some of the cheaper ones, our body really struggles to absorb them, so actually it ends up being quite expensive but yeah, they can be really helpful to give you that extra boost.
That's good to know as well, Anna, thank you. And the next question kind of fits into that too. Emma's asking about vitamin and mineral supplements actually of benefit. So I think you've probably almost covered that.
Yeah, and it's so difficult to say from one person to the next, because any kind of we'd be very cautious about recommending a single nutrient, because it can then really knock out the other nutrients. Even just recommending one B vitamin, if we say, oh, just take a B12 supplement, you might want to do that if you're vegetarian or vegan, but otherwise you want to go food first, because then you get the benefit of, if you're getting a food source that's rich in B12, you're also going to be getting protein, you're also going to be getting some minerals, and other vitamins and so on. So if you just focus in on one nutrient, particularly if it's a mineral, it can really knock out the balance with other minerals. So you just need to be really careful. But if you do feel particularly low and you feel that you might benefit from a really good quality multivitamin, that might give you a bit of a lift for a short while. And generally would say just take it for sort of 8 to 12 weeks max and see how you feel. And then maybe give yourself a break, because if you don't need a vitamin and then that is building up, there can actually be toxicity in actually overdoing it. So you just want to be careful. And again, there are some wonderful combinations of herbs and minerals together as well. Some wonderful, we call them nutraceuticals, where it's a kind of combination of nutrients and herbs. And they can be really great. Again, some of the herbs that you would get in these, you can get in lovely herbal teas. They're very safe in those kind of quantities in herbal tea, that can be very soothing. And again, if you're on any kind of medication, there can be some quite serious interactions between medication and herbs. So just get some extra advice before you just start experimenting too much with things.
Okay. Brent is asking if there's any natural foods that are known to reduce stomach acids. Any knowledge on that, Anna?
So this is a really interesting area. I could talk about this for a very long time, so I'm going to try and keep it very brief. But stomach acid can be typically seen as a bad thing. And so if people have acid reflux, the automatic treatment for that will be to stop your production of stomach acid. We absolutely need stomach acid to break down food. We can't break down protein unless the stomach has a particular acidity. We can't fight off and kill bacteria, harmful bacteria in the gut, unless we have a good level of acidity in the gut, in the stomach. So sometimes we can reduce the stomach acid, but then it can trigger a whole host of other problems. So if you're talking about reducing stomach acid because of acid reflux, there can be foods that can encourage reflux. So we would tend to then look to cut out spicy food and caffeine. Sometimes tomatoes, garlic, and even peppermint can sometimes cause acid reflux. So we'd look to perhaps initially reduce those foods, and then we would look at reducing the inflammation that's sometimes caused from the acid that comes up. We'd certainly start to really slow down meal times, so not eating on the go can be really beneficial with reducing acid reflux. And then look at a kind of gut healing program to try and stem the levels of inflammation and do some healing, so that the acid isn't rising back up. But just blocking stomach acid because you have acid reflux, to me, is not the answer. But it can be a bit of a controversial subject.
Interesting. We've then got a little bit of discussion around kefir, and Emma has said it makes her feel really sick and dizzy, and she's googled it, and sometimes there are those kind of side effects.
Yes, if you're not used to having any kind of probiotic foods, and if you have got any kind of gut symptoms, so if you regularly get indigestion or bloating, sometimes that can aggravate things for a little while. So with probiotics, just go really, really slowly. So maybe just start even with like a teaspoon of kefir and see how it makes you feel. And getting those prebiotic foods, the foods that feed your natural gut bugs, so increasing your levels of vegetables and whole grains first, will help to build the health in your gut, so that you can then tolerate different levels of probiotics.
And the next comment from Brian. Brian, are you still on? I'm a bit puzzled as to the how about horseradish. Is that instead of kefir, or what's that to
Well, it's a
help?
good. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only recently discovered it. I like horseradish, but to use it grated in salad, not only is it quite zippy, but I read that it's really full of enzymes, really beneficial stuff. Just take a little bit of getting used to.
So enzymes are what helps us to break down our food. So also there are lots of enzymes in things like pineapple and papaya. So having them that are natural digestive enzymes, they can really help to break down our food really well. So that can help if you do struggle with digestive issues. So yeah, if you can stomach horseradish, then and I think that there's I think it's an Asian probiotic. It's called kimchi, and that's like it's like a really spicy version of our sauerkraut. So our sort of pickled cabbage that we have. The really spicy version would be a bit like a fermented horseradish type food, so a really spicy version of that, which some people quite enjoy, but it is quite potent.
We make homemade kimchi. It's really, really good. You can eat it with
Fantastic.
salad or stir it into your food.
Exactly. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, really beneficial.
Cool. Kimberly is asking if Greek yogurt has probiotic benefits like natural yogurt.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they both have significantly less probiotics than kefir, but they're both a great place to. You'll definitely get some benefit from those as well. Yeah.
Liz, I am celiac. Liz, I'm a little bit querying. Are you still on, Liz? Do you want to ask a question? Because I think there's a typo in it. It's something to do with celiac and IBD.
Yeah. Sorry, Anna. A lot of the food available to people that are celiac's got loads of the nasties in them. How sort of damaging are them to your diet overall? Because obviously there's limited choices and it's all very expensive.
Yeah, it really is. So trying to get foods that are guaranteed to have no gluten in whatsoever can be really tricky as well, because obviously some things may contain a trace of gluten, which you don't want to be risking at all. So getting those bags of the natural grains like quinoa or the different gluten-free grains and trying to prepare things for yourself is probably the best way of stripping away all those different processing. It's a bit like people that are gluten-free. So many of the alternatives are so highly processed that they're not necessary, and they have huge shelf lives as well. They can be in date for 18 months or so. So it's not the same as having a fresh loaf of bread by any means. So yeah, it is a case of really having to invest in preparing stuff for yourself if you have the capability to do that, Liz.
Sorry, can I just so a lot of the flour alternatives, obviously it's not wheat. Does the tapioca and other flour alternatives have the same? Is that ultra processed as well?
No, not necessarily. So we would, so if you buy like a whole grain flour, that's still going to have had some processing, but it's just not had everything, all of the helpful fibers sort of stripped away. So there are other flours that can still be beneficial, and you can, sometimes I will just get my little bullet and blend up a load of flax seeds to make like a floury coating. If I then want to sort of coat that in some pieces of fish, just to make my own kind of gluten-free fish fillets. And so that will just look like a flour. Then you can do the same with oats. You can just whiz those up as well with gluten-free oats to make your own kind of flours. But I think the supermarkets are getting better, because I think gluten-free is not uncommon these days. So there is a more variety of choice for you. But just whizzing up, if you've got like a little coffee grinder or a little bullet, flax seeds are a brilliant thing to just whiz up quickly, and you get a lovely floury product there at the end, which can be quite helpful for like making your own little biscuits or just as a coating for foods as well.
Fabulous. I think we've got just a few minutes left and still a few questions, I think, in the chat bar, so we'll see what we can get to. So Claire's asking if there's any dopamine rich foods that you would recommend.
Yeah, so dopamine is a hormone that is our kind of like reward hormone. So often if we have a bit of an addictive personality and we crave reward, that can mean that we can be sort of be quite sort of craving the dopamine fix, if you like. So to kind of balance that out, dopamine is made from the amino acid tyrosine. So if you look at foods that are rich in tyrosine, your proteins such as there would be things like turkey mince. Turkey is quite high in tyrosine. That's one of the main ones I can think of off the top of my head. But if you were to look at tyrosine-rich foods, they then sort of cascade down to producing the dopamine hormone. If you're looking at that same pathway also comes down to make our sleep hormone melatonin. So there can also be foods that can help support you with sleep as well. And they're from the similar food groups too. So if you look at tyrosine-rich foods, that would be the ones I'd recommend.
Thank you. Brian's got another question about time-regulated eating. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this can be really beneficial. It's also sometimes known as intermittent fasting. And the natural point time for that would be when we're having our main bulk of sleep. And trying to schedule in a good 12 hours a day of not eating can be really beneficial, both on weight management and on mood too. It gives the gut time to heal. So if we have got any levels of inflammation in the gut, it gives time for healing and for cell repair and for cell regeneration too. So on lots of different aspects of health, it can be very beneficial. Some people do take it a bit extreme, and you hear about people only eating within a 4-hour window and having a 20-hour fasting period. In my opinion, to do that, you would need quite a serious health condition that you're trying to treat, like a inflammatory bowel disease or something like that, where there's a lot of inflammation. Otherwise, I just don't think that you'd have the energy for the rest of the day necessarily to sustain you long term with making it that extreme. But I think 12, maybe 14 hours can be very beneficial.
Thank you. I think this one might be the last one. There's some comments and lots of people saying thanks. Thanks for today's session, Anna. So there's some great comments there. But Gillian is vegan and needs to avoid soy due to an intolerance issue. So any other good sources of protein to help with that?
Yeah, so I think probably your main reliance would need to be on nuts and seeds, probably with nut butters and different seed things like tahini. They're probably going to be the main 2 areas that you can focus on if you can't tolerate soy. Yes, it's quite tricky if you're vegan. So you may want to look at getting a vegan protein powder, like a pea protein or something like that in that you might want to supplement with to make sure your protein levels are really good.
Cool, and I think we're 11:59 we're on, and I think that's the end of the questions in the chat. So lots and lots of thank yous, Anna, and some really positive feedback for that session. I think it's been very useful for those that are on the call. So thank you so much. I think there's lots of people dashing away to other meetings and such like, but as we mentioned at the beginning, it is recorded. It will be uploaded onto the Oscar Kilo website, so it can be accessed from there for anyone that wants to revisit or tell colleagues about. So thank you, Anna. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Anything that you want to say just to finish off, Anna, or are we done?
No, it's been some really great questions. Thank you so much for contributing those at the end. It's been really great, and yeah, I hope it's been helpful. I know we have focused quite a lot on what not to eat, but hopefully as well you can go and check out those recipe resources and get experimenting in the kitchen again, and try and fall back in love with cooking, because it really is so beneficial on lots of levels and can be quite a lovely mindful exercise if you can kind of if you can put it in the right context in your brain, put some great music on, experiment in the kitchen and have some fun with food again, rather than just going for that quick off-the-shelf option all the time.
Fabulous. Thank you. And we'll leave it at that. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.